Hello everybody and welcome back to Unlocking Unreal Engine. Last time we covered a lot of the basics of the engine, like a little bit of the UI and why it's deciding to make some of the decisions it's making by default. Now we're going to take that fundamental understanding, and today we're going to dynamically instantiate a multi-threaded asynchronous task that spawns procedural mesh components at runtime using a recursive A pathfinding algorithm to optimize vertex placement with a spline-based navigation system while integrating the result with a custom-built animation blueprint driven by a real-time physics simulation. I'm lying to you. Look, I'm not even looking at the camera, watch. I turn that off, I'm not even looking at it. It was AI. I'm not even, look, watch. Look, I'm not even, hold on. That's not even what was on screen. I'm using ChatGPT. But no, seriously, with some, not all, of the basics under our belt, today I actually wanted us to get our hands a little bit dirty and create a small system where something happens. And then if there's time left, we are going to investigate the flaws of what we created so you can start to begin to think about ways that maybe we can fix those fundamental flaws. So we're going to create our very first ever blueprint. Think about blueprints in the quite literal sense. You know those big pieces of blue paper and they got the white lines all over them that show you where to build the walls and what's going to be happening? In a way, that's what we're going to be doing. The blueprint is going to let our game know what to be doing during runtime. So we're creating essentially a plan, and then the engine makes the plan happen while the runtime is happening. If you don't know what runtime means, by the way, it essentially means the game is running. It's going. Okay, so I want you guys to follow along today. So if you don't have your project open, go ahead and open it right up. If your content drawer isn't open, it looks like this. Remember, Control Space. I'm then going to go over here and I'm going to click on Content up here at the top because that's the highest level of my folder structure. And in the blank space, I am going to right click and I'm going to click on New Folder. Now, how I like to do this is I like to do an underscore, my name, and then BPs. The reason I do this is if I have collaborators, I have my own workspace, and the underscore ensures that it will always be at the start of the list. Let's go ahead and open up our folder. And within Brandon BPs, I'm going to right click again, and I'm going to create another new folder, and I'm going to call this Actors. We're going to open that up. Now, you might be wondering, what's an actor? Why did I know to make a folder named Actors, and what even is that? I'm going to post a link to a video of mine down below called Opening Your Third Eye or something like that. But the very short version of it is an actor is something that is in 3D space. It has to have a transform, a scale, and a rotation in order to exist in 3D space. So if I click on this blue box here, on the right hand side, or wherever your details panel is, you'll notice that we have a transform. It has a location, a rotation, and a scale. These three values are what put it in 3D space. It's how it exists somewhere. So in order for something to be an actor, it has to have a transform. But I still highly recommend the video down below. Okay, I'm gonna go back to Control Space where I'm in that Actors folder, and I'm gonna right click, and now I'm gonna make a blueprint class. Anytime I reference a blueprint, I mean a blueprint class. Don't let that confuse you. And now we're going to select actor. The reason we're selecting actor is we don't need anything fancy. Understand the further down this list you go, the more complicated it gets. To a degree, I'm sure there's an exception here. Remember how I said actors need to transform? Well, a pawn is an actor, so it already has the transform, but we also assume that it can be possessed by the player controller or an AI. Next, we have a character, which is an actor that has a transform. It is also a pawn because it can be possessed, but it also assumes we're going to need some kind of movement mechanic so it can move around. I'm not going to go into detail on all of these, but that's why it's a blueprint class, and then the classes get further defined. But don't worry about any of that right now. We're going to click on actor. And I'm going to type in, remember, folder structure and naming convention are ridiculously important. BP for blueprint, underscore, light system. And notice that I'm using uppercase for every first letter of a word, and I'm not putting spaces. I'm going to press enter. Now, you'll notice this little asterisk here that pops up at the bottom left. That means it's there, but it's not saved. So anytime you make a new file, before you even open it, just remember to hit Control-Shift-S. That'll save all. Now we can open it up. And to open it, simply double-click it. Mine opened on the wrong screen. These are just tabs, so I can literally just pull it over like it's a Windows Explorer tab or whatever, and then I can put it up here, and now it's a part of the main window. You'll see we started right here in the viewport. If you remember from last episode, the viewport is just a visual representation of what we're creating. And as the name suggests, we are going to be building a light system. And as I said also, it will have fundamental flaws, but the goal is to teach you what's going on. Then we'll think about those flaws. So anytime you're making a blueprint, whenever you click on this left-hand area and you click on something like the default scene route, for example, whenever you have something selected, on the right-hand side in this details panel, this is all the information about the thing that you currently have selected. We're not going to worry too much about the default scene route. We are going to leave it there, though. It's basically the anchor of the actor in 3D space. So whenever you change an actor's transform, which it's required to have, you're moving the anchor, and then everything else in the blueprint moves relatively to the anchor. If you don't know what relative means, don't worry. I will show you in a moment. For now, what I want you to do is just click in the components, specifically in an area where there's nothing, so you deselect anything you have selected. And there's a reason for that, but it's too complicated for right now, so don't worry. And with nothing selected, I'm going to go ahead and click Add, because we're going to be adding a component to our blueprint. So we know this is going to be a light system, so I'm just going to type in the word light. And you'll notice that there are different types of lights. We're going to be going with a point light for now. Just know that specifically a point light is a light that radiates from a central point in all directions. I'm going to go ahead and leave this as point light. I'm not going to change the name in this particular case. We added a component, so I'm going to Control-Shift-S just to make sure it's all saved. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to navigate the viewport a little bit. I'm going to right click so I can move around, and then I'm going to hold S so I back up. And I'm just going to kind of look and see. Now you notice we have this big white spherical thing going on. If you don't, it's because your point light isn't selected anymore. When I click off of it, notice it goes away. But when I click on it, it returns. You'll notice over here in the details panel, we have all kinds of things now that can affect this point light, such as the light color or the attenuation radius. For those that don't know, that's actually the big white circles. That is how far the light is going to travel and affect things. This number ends up being very important when it comes to optimizing your frame rate. You want this to be as low as possible while still maintaining the look you need. And you can come up with all kinds of crazy strategies to make that possible. But that's for another time. And without doing anything complicated, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go up here and I'm going to hit Save and Compile. Now, what is compiling? You should be familiar with what saving a file is, but what is compiling? Well, whenever you're creating something that has specifically code that you created, compile essentially just says there are no obvious errors here. To put it as simple as possible, some code requires other code to exist or it crashes. When you compile, it's saying there is none of that is obviously present. Notice I'm using the word obviously. You can still crash your game, but I'm going to show you ways to avoid that. But that's what compiling is. It runs through the code and it says you're good. And then you can hit save. Well, actually you should save first, compile. Now you can use the blueprint. There's technically a better definition for compile, by the way. I believe it's turning the lines of code into actual CPU instructions. So that's the actual definition, but for the sake of understanding, it is also looking for those errors, and that's where you care the most. Okay, we're going to go back to our first person map. So I'm going to change tabs up here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make it really dark. And you can follow along if you'd like with this. And the way I'm going to make it really dark is over here. do you see this directional light? If you can't find it for whatever reason, don't forget about your outliner, the hierarchy over here. But I'm just going to go ahead and click on mine. And you'll see that in the details panel, just like the one in our blueprint, we have an intensity here. I'm going to set this to 0 and watch what happens. All of a sudden, it got really dark really fast. That's because a directional light, it acts like a sun. And I mean quite literally. If I put this back to 3 and we use Unreal Engine Sky System, look what happens when I look up in the direction or the opposite direction that this is facing. See how it's facing down and left? Well, if I look up and right, notice there's the sun. So a directional light is essentially just imitating the sun. But I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to set this to 0, and you'll see that it gets dark really, really fast. So if you do get lost, by the way, remember, just click your directional light and add some light. In fact, what I'll do is I'll make it really dim. I'll put it at like 0.25, so that way we can kind of see what's going on regardless. Control-Shift-S to save all. And then I'm going to move kind of over here somewhere in our little play area where it's dark. And I'm going to hit Control-Space. And you see this BP light system? Remember, we just added a light to it, a point light? I'm going to drag that out into the world. Now, you'll see that it's already illuminating some of the area around it. The reason it looks kind of weird is because of built lighting. We're not going to worry about that right now. And if I pull this up, it's also in the ground. So if you go ahead and pull that up, it's because it's in the ground, and that's why it's not lighting very well. But if we pull this up, you'll see that we do have some light bouncing around here. However, I guess I should explain, just in case your arrows aren't here. Yours might look like that, or that, or that. Oh dear. Okay. So what's happening is if you press Q on the keyboard, you are in select mode. You can only select things. If you press W on the keyboard, you can move things about by grabbing these arrows. Of course, you can also move them about by changing their transform in the details panel. Or if you press E, now you've got a rotator, so now you can rotate it. But of course, we can't really see a visual of it except for the white radius of our attenuation radius. And then you can press R. Don't mess with this. Well, I guess you can. Have some fun with it. This is the scaler. This scales things. You're typically going to avoid this whenever possible. You'll note it's not doing anything in this case because it's just a point light, and lights can't scale like that. So after you've messed with it, go back over here in the details panel and make sure your scale is set to 1, 1, 1. All of them 1. If it seems like you're having trouble setting them to 1, like you change one and it changes another, it's because this is locked. This essentially locks the shape, and I'm going to show you that since we're talking about it. So let me move this into the light. If I go to my scaler, which is R, and I lock this, and then I try to make it bigger, you'll notice it grows in unison. It stays the exact same object, but it grows in unison. But notice when I turn off the scaler, and then I just grab like one side and pull, it lets it stretch. So that's what's happening there if you are messing with the scaler and all the numbers are changing, even though you're only trying to change one. So to go ahead and unlock that. Anyway, grab your light, make sure it's set to 1, and there you go. You now have your first blueprint in your world. But let's actually make it do something. Let's learn a little bit about the code, yeah? I'm going to Control-Shift-S since we made some changes to the open world and go back into the blueprint. In order to make something happen, an event needs to happen, and that is why it's called the event graph. If you click on it, you'll notice that you'll have an event begin play, you'll have an event actor begin overlap, and an event tick. Notice that these are honestly not that dangerous except for event tick. If you do things with event tick and you do not know what you're doing, it can get a bit scary. Just understand that with event tick, every single frame that passes, so let's say the user is at 120 frames a second, every frame that passes, event tick goes off. So I'm going to show you something. We're going to do print string, okay? Remember, I've got mine set to 30 frames a second. So we're going to get 30 hellos every second. So I'm going to hit compile and save, and we're going to go to our map here. You're going to pay attention to the top left side of the viewport here. Just watch the madness of the hellos. You're not even seeing all of them because I'm pretty sure it can't display that many hellos. You saw how quickly and rapidly it filled up my screen, and it's still happening as we speak. And it won't stop until I hit escape. So the event tick is extremely useful, and you'll learn ways to use it, but now you see why it's dangerous. Imagine if you were calculating like some form of physics or something right here. It wouldn't go well. So I'm going to go ahead and click this and hit delete. And let's actually talk about what events are. Events are exactly like what they sound. Something happened. In this case, on the event tick, a frame passed. On event begin play, it means that either the game just started simulating, like it just went, runtime started, or the actor just spawned. So if you spawn an actor, it will trigger event begin play. If you just start the game, it will trigger event begin play. Essentially, think of event begin play as the code exists now, do your thing. Then you have actor begin overlap. It's pretty much what it sounds like. Hey, an actor is overlapping us. What should we do? But for now, let's ignore all three of these, and I'll show you why. Go back to your viewport. We're going to create our own event based on a trigger box. I'm going to go over here and I'm going to click, make sure nothing's selected. I'm going to click add, and I'm just going to go ahead and type in box, and you'll see we have box collision, and I'm going to click on that. Now I'm going to actually name this. So we're going to do box underscore trigger light, compile and save. And then I'm going to fly forward in my viewport here by right clicking and holding W. And you'll see now we have a box around our light. And if we go to the first person map, you'll see that it's already being shown here as well. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go into our light system, and on the right hand side, you'll see that there's something called box extent. If it's not there, make sure you have it selected, the box trigger light. And I'm going to make this like 300 in every direction. And you'll note that this is pretty big. With that's done, I'm going to hit compile and save, and then we're going to go back to the first person map and see how large it is. So we created a box about that large. So what we're going to do is we're going to make it so if the player enters this box, the light will turn on. If they leave the box, the light will turn off. And remember your vocabulary, we're going to be doing this with events. Something happened, run some code. Let's go back to the light system. We're going to go to the event graph. And this is where, if you're new, you can actually start to have a little bit of fun. If you have a component and you know what you want is relative to that component, there's a chance what you're looking for is already pre-programmed. Let me give you an example. If I right click on the box trigger light here, if I go and I move my mouse so I can see it, you'll see we have add event. And notice we have a list of events that are already pre-programmed with the collision box. And the collision box is nice because a lot of the times it has to do with collision, so they're already pre-programmed. What we're going to be looking for is on component begin overlap. Okay, and you're going to get this red box. Why is it red? Because it's an event. An event happened. Something happened. Run some code. But you're going to notice it's a little scary. There's a lot of options here. Well, when is this going to run? On component begin overlap. This is going to run when something overlaps this component. It's worded like on component begin overlap because in theory, the component could be moving as well. But in this case, we're going to be using different vocabulary because we know it's stationary. So whenever something overlaps this component, we need you to do something. This is called the execution pin. Basically, whenever this is finished running, it will automatically go into the execution pin and continue. Of course, this is an event, so we know that essentially this is the start, the spark, but any other node that has these, it's going to shoot right through as soon as it's finished. Okay, so yeah, on component begin overlap, let's grab a point light. Oh, I should probably explain that you can do this. We have our component list over here, right? if we grab a component, we can actually drag it onto the event graph and let go. And all of a sudden we have a reference to that thing. Now, what do we do in the event graph? To keep it as simple as possible, think of the event graph as a way to change the details in the details panel during runtime. Now, that is a very limited scope to the possibility, but that's what you're going to be doing most of the time. So for now, just understand we're simply going to use code in the event graph now to edit details. What do we want to edit the details of? The point light. So everything in the event graph is context sensitive. Let me show you an example. I'm going to pull the box trigger light out as well. The point light has color, right? We can change the color of the light. In case you don't believe me, in our details with the light selected, or actually, hold on, I'm not going to show you this way. That's more complicated. Don't worry. We'll get to that. Sorry. Go to the viewport, click on the point light. You'll notice that in the details panel, we have light color. We can change this to whatever we want. If I set it to like a deep red, hit OK, compile and save. I'm trying to break the habit. I do it backwards. It is save and compile. If you see it and I don't catch it, leave a comment. You guys, it's your goal now to catch me on it. But if I go back to the first person map, you'll notice it's now red. Okay, so what were we talking about? We're talking about the context sensitivity of the event graph. If I pull specifically out of the point light and I type in light color, all of a sudden, look, we can get light color, we can set light color, and you'll notice there's like 4 ways to do it. Don't panic. We'll get to that. But if I pull out of the box trigger and I type in light color, all of a sudden it doesn't appear. So whenever you see me pull out of something specific, or I specifically right click on the event graph, it's purely from experience of getting used to the context sensitivity. Now, technically I can turn off context sensitive and it'll be like, hey, you can do those things. It's not going to work. So for the most part, you can leave this on, and I would highly recommend you leave it on until you have a further understanding of why you might turn it off. Basically, understand the rule before you break it. I'm going to go ahead and grab the box trigger light now and hit delete. It was only there for an example. And as you can see, we have our event, and what we want to do is we want to take our point light. And I haven't told you what this is called yet, but you'll understand it's very simple. I'm going to type in the word set. Whenever you type in the word set, you're saying, hey, I'm changing something to this. If you type in get, you're seeing what it is. But sets it. We're going to set the visibility, okay? If the visibility is set to true, we can see it. If the visibility is set to false, we cannot see it. The new visibility we want, if we're overlapping, is true, because we're overlapping it. So yeah, go ahead and set your visibility to true. Compile and save. However, you'll notice there's an error or a problem. If we go back to our map, the light's already on. So this isn't going to work. What we're going to do is we're going to go back to the blueprint. We're going to click on the point light. We're going to go over to the details. And if you can't see it, you can start typing in visible, and it will pop up. Or if you know where it's at on the list, just simply check this to false. Compile and save. And now when we go back to the map, it's no longer on by default. So let's hit play and see what happens. So I hit play and I look over and I walk on over here and, oh yeah, look at that. We're good to go. What happens when I walk up to it? It turned on. That's awesome. But I made this really faulty for a reason. Let's take a look at one of the reasons it's faulty. Let's reset the simulation. I'm going to hit escape. I'm going to hit play. And I'm going to grab the gun this time. And I'm not going to walk up to the light. I'm just going to shoot at it. First off, that's hilarious. I didn't think about that. The bullets can't actually overlap it because they collide with it. Hold on. Here, we'll use this. I'm angry that my example isn't working. Essentially what I'm trying to show you is any actor at all, except for, I guess, static mesh actors, which that's what these are, by the way, will set this light off, not just the player. So we need further logic to make sure only the player sets it off. And I'm mad that it's not working. You'll just have to trust me on it. So we'll go over to the light system, and we can use some of this other information to make sure that only the player will set it off. So how I'm going to do this is I'm going to take point light. I'm actually going to put it underneath like this. This is one way you can keep things organized. I'm going to drag it out a little bit further. And if you ever have an execution pin and you want to undo that pin, hold an Alt and click on the line, or you can click on either of the execution pins. So if we want this to only go off when it's the player, and I'm still mad that it didn't work, what we need to do is we have a couple of features that Unreal Engine uses for us. If we right click and we hit get, remember what get is? Get's like we're checking something. If we get the player character, okay, this will return whatever pawn the player is currently controlling. Because remember, a pawn is something that can be possessed. So if it's possessed by the player controller, this get player character will return that pawn. We're using a lot of vocabulary, but I'm hoping you're getting enough understanding to know what I'm talking about here, okay? If you're not, leave a comment. Leave a comment with a clear question and I'll give you a clear answer. That sounded hostile. It wasn't supposed to be. So now we know what the player is controlling. And if you look at the information we get from this event, we have another actor or other actor. There's something really cool you can do in Unreal Engine. A lot of it's pretty intuitive. It's just, you got to get used to it. If we pull out of the other actor that's overlapping and we just type in the word, or literally the symbol equal, we'll get equal. So is other actor equal to the pawn that the player is controlling? And you'll note we get this little red dot. A red dot indicates a Boolean. For those that don't know, a Boolean means true or false. So if other actor equals player character, true. If other actor does not equal player character, false. Now, there's two ways we can do what we need to do now. We can right click anywhere on the graph and type in the word branch. And you'll click the one here that has the little arrows. Or the way I highly recommend you get used to doing is holding B. Just literally hold B on the keyboard and then click in the event graph. And there's a branch. What we're going to do is we're going to take the execution pin. We're going to take it out of this event, plug it into the branch. And you'll see that it requires a condition. Otherwise, it will always be true or false, depending on what you set, which would be pointless. So we're going to take this pin, plug it into the condition. And then what I like to do, so my code is a lot more easy to read, is on branches, I will right click. I'll go down here to the node comment section and I'll click and I'll type in what it's doing. Is the actor overlapping the box underscore trigger light the player question mark, and then press enter. And you'll see that now it simply puts it over the branch, so it's very easy to see what it's checking. Now, if it goes too long, like you want this to be a little bit less, now that it's above the comment, you can't do it in the menu, but while it's above the comment, you can just click somewhere and then just like press shift enter, and it will bring it down for you. So like boop, like that. And there we go. So is the other actor, or is the actor overlapping the box trigger light the player? If true, if it is, set the visibility to true. If not, don't do anything. And we'll hit compile and save. So I'm going to give homework assignments, not always, but sometimes. Your job now is to right click on the box trigger light, go to add event, on component, end overlap. All right, you have all of the pieces already. Use the code up here to turn the light off when the player and only the player ends their overlap with the box. So when they're no longer on top of that box, the light turns off. Again, all the pieces are here. Please do remember to like, comment, and subscribe. Leave comments down below about what you would like to see as we go forward. Remember that I do have a Patreon, which helps me bring you these videos at such a good quality. And I'm more likely to take your questions and advice on what content to do if you're a patron. But you guys are great. Thank you so much for making this series a success already. I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.